You're listening to Popstar Conversations, taking you inside with your favorite musical artists.
Chuck and I are sitting here with Chrissie Hynde of The Pretenders. Chrissie, thanks for joining us.
It's good to have you here.
This record, Stockholm, it's your first international record in 6 years. What have you been up to?
I don't spend all of my time just doing music, I have other shit I do, when I'm not doing music. I'm not very ambitious, and I'm not like the most motivated. What I love is being on the road. I love being on the road, and I love making records. So actually, in the last 6 years, I did make another album, which was another collaboration that only came out in America. So that took a couple of years, and I toured America with that. I toured Australia with Blondie at one point. That was fun, because that was in kind of different territories. And and then I made this record. So, and actually, since the last Pretenders album, which took 11 days to make, this took 2 years because I had to keep going back and forth to Stockholm. We toured a lot after the last Pretenders album too. We did a lot of touring, so it's actually been pretty full up with work.
When you're doing a solo record, how is it different from doing a Pretenders record?
This is called a solo album, but it's actually more of a collaboration than anything I've ever worked on. Wrote with all the songs with Bjorn Ytling and a few with Jockey Olhund. And I've never done that before for a whole album. I mean, generally with the Pretenders, I bring the lion's share or all of the songs into the band. But they wouldn't leave Stockholm and work with me and come and get in a band with me. I begged them, but they have other bands and they do other things. So I was just left on my own, and that's why it's got my name on it. It's embarrassing because I like being in a band. I don't like being out front. But there you go.
But in the past, weren't you opposed to a solo career?
And I always said never. I think it's a kind of a marketing tool now as well. Not something I would have thought I'd say 30 years ago, but really no one cares anymore, and that's the way it's gone. And my sort of new management team, that's another thing. I've got a whole new organization and so, I had a lot of business to attend to. And they all thought this was a good way to kind of revamp things a little bit. And I'm happy to take advice, and I'm a team player, so I like to do what everyone wants me to do, as long as I can do what I want to do in the studio and on stage. The rest of it's, use me already, so.
How did you end up collaborating with Bjorn?
Peter, John, and Bjorn, yeah, and then Jockey is in another band. Bjorn is in Peter, John, and Bjorn, which I didn't know who they were until about 5 subsequent visits, and then I finally Googled him. And realized what band he was in. And then his friend Jockey Olhund is in a band called the Caesars and the Teddy Bears. So when Bjorn was trying to pawn me off on someone, because I think he was trying to get rid of me, he said, go write with Jockey for a while, which we did. And then, it took a lot to convince Bjorn to do the whole thing, just because he was very busy.
Wasn't Peter producing Licky Lee in between?
He was doing that. He was doing Peter, John, and Bjorn. And, he's got a family, all that kind of thing. Whereas I'm just hanging around waiting. So, like I said, it must have been about 20 visits to go there, work for 2 or 3 days and come back. But I don't mind, because I don't mind traveling and being on my own. So I'm used to it.
Well, with all that traveling you were doing, it must have really added to the, how long it took to make this record.
Yeah. I mean, I went there about every, maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks I'd go. And, I had my own stuff going on in the meantime, and so did they. So I always had to wait till they had some time, and I had some time. So it just took, but I didn't mind, because I was glad to hang out and go to Stockholm. And I was there in the winter when it was dark all the time. And then I was there in the summer when it never gets dark, and it's a beautiful city, and I could hang out and explore a bit. So I was happy. I mean, it's one of the beautiful cities in the world. And I love cities, so I love exploring them and wandering around. I went through a cathedral one day on the way to go see Jockey, and I saw these little bracelets on the way out. They sell candles and stuff, and I bought these little bracelets, and I said, hey, look what I got us. Jockey's all tattooed, and he likes jewelry and stuff. He's not like Bjorn. So I had my little bracelet on, and I put his little bracelet on him, and I got one for Bjorn. I was determined that we were going to be a band. And Jockey looked and he goes, what are these Russian icons? I said, I don't know, but that's what the name of our band is. So I called us the Russian Icons for a year, but I couldn't force them to leave Stockholm. So now it's just me again.
Generally speaking, the Swedish people, they're quite tranquil.
They're very stoic, which has worked out well because once I started seeing how it worked, not Yaki so much, but with Bjorn, I did things on this record which I never would have dreamt of doing on my own. Like getting Neil Young. I wouldn't have called Neil, even though I know him, I wouldn't have called him because he's Neil Young. I just wouldn't have done that if it was really a solo album. But I was kind of fucking with Bjorn's head, and because we had this one song that we kept referring to as a Neil Young song, one day I said, well, of course I could always get Neil Young on, and I was totally fucking with him, just to see if I could get a reaction out of this stoic Swede. And then 3 more visits went by, and I would refer to the Neil Young song, and I thought, actually, I could get Neil Young on this song, and that is a good idea. So that's, so I called him and we did it. Same with McEnroe. I was just trying to get a rise out of Bjorn when I realized he liked tennis. So I said, had McEnroe come down to our studio when he was doing a sort of tennis match. Otherwise, I wouldn't have thought of it. And I'm glad I thought of it because I've known John for 30 years, and he's been on stage with the Pretenders, and, we're great friends.
In all the years that you've been performing, did you ever have to cancel a performance?
Sure, and myself, I think I've canceled maybe 5 gigs in my career. Once when a doctor said I'd have a miscarriage. Once when a doctor said both of my eardrums were going to explode if I got on stage. So there's always been, I'm not a crybaby. I will get on that stage and I'm always on time. But there comes a point when modifications have to be made. So get it while you can if you're 30, but, get ready to put the cork in the bottle. And especially with the smoking, it's all these addictions are psychological anyway. They're easy to walk away from, but it takes about 30 years of thinking about it before you can, that's the mind fuck of it all.
Okay, let's get back to this record. Were you after a danceable rock record with this one?
I have always been after a danceable rock record, and I don't think some of the Pretenders records really made it on that level. That's why I love the Black Keys stuff. It's got that fairground. They really pay attention to rhythms, and that's where I think the starting point should be. And that's how it was on this record. I actually didn't have an agenda in mind. The reason I kept working with Bjorn is because that's how he did it. He started with a good rhythm, and then he'd have little top-line melody or maybe a couple words, and I'd say, he'd put it on his little laptop. I'd press the bar and listen to 8 bars. That's as much information as I'd get in one go. And then I'd say, okay, come back down in a half an hour. And he'd leave me in the basement, and when he'd come back, I usually was ready to do the vocal.
And there's a song in this record, Dark Sunglasses, and it's about the British upper class. How did you come up with that? That
was Bjorn's title. And I said to him, oh, come on. I didn't say anything. But what I thought was, you can't write a song called Dark Sunglasses. It's such a cliche. And in fact, I was wrong, because it's a great title for a song. But that's the fun thing about collaboration is the other collaborator that I had a lot of fun with, and the only other person, I've written lyrics with a couple of people now, but was Tom Kelly and Billy Steinberg. Because Billy Steinberg would have a very sentimental, sensitive song, and that made me feel sadistic, so I would really kind of fuck with it. And that's how the thing worked, is we would kind of mess with each other. And we wrote some of my favorite songs together, actually. So working with someone else, even if you've just met them 10 minutes ago, can really trigger things off. And with songs, that's what you need. You need a trigger, and if they have a title, even better, because that puts you in a direction. If you're sitting alone in a room with a guitar for years, the way I've done, just trying to be inspired or trying to express yourself, sometimes it's too lonely. It's depressing. You're tortured while you're trying to write the song sometimes. Not always, but it's not always a pleasure. And, what's the point?
Was that song referring to the royal family?
No, it's got nothing to do with anyone in the royal family. I think it was a bit of a comment on the class system, the way it exists in England, which is breaking down and changing a lot. And, it's not for the first time it is dissolving somewhat. And I think people will miss it when it's gone, because society always has some sort of hierarchy. And the way it's going now, where it's becoming more third world, where there's the rich are stinking rich, and the people who have nothing, really have nothing, like impoverished. the middle classes kind of keep the thing afloat, and it's it's not going that way at the moment. But anyway, this song was more a reference to the English class system, and sort of the middle classes are the ones that are social climbers and try to better themselves. The working class and the upper classes, they just stay where they are, and they don't want to move because they like where they are, traditionally.
Even though rock music has always been the expression of the middle class.
Traditionally, it was a tool for working class kids to express themselves. Like many of the arts were a vehicle for people who, again, I'm actually American, so I was in the States for the first 20 years, and then I came over here, and it took me another 30 years to start to understand how this class system worked. I find it very amusing myself because I'm not part of it, so I have no feelings about it, really. It doesn't trigger any emotions in me at all. But I'm an observer, and I can see the way it's going, and I can see the way it's gone in the States too. And I think people will always find their own hierarchy, and there's always a sense of superiority with some people. Whether they are superior or not is something else. But in largely, it's based on money these days. But the cultures generally come from the bottom up more. Or maybe up at the higher echelons of society, they're paying for it, but it's the people at the bottom that are doing the creative work, traditionally. But now, for the first time, a lot of more privileged kids are making music, and certainly in films. But I mean, to have a grudge against the upper classes is just as lame as having putting someone down for being black or gay, or it's just that's just inexcusable, and it's indefensible. But that's what all these working class kids were doing in the punk days. What they were really pissed off about is they didn't have the money. So this idea that it was social justice. Someone like Strummer, who was working class, he did have something to say about social injustice. But the ones who were just working class, they just wanted to get the money. That's the way it goes, because oppressed people usually are more interested in getting the spoils of the oppressor than fighting the oppressor. That's what I've learned.
Throughout the years, you have become an expert at writing love songs, haven't you?
Well, I'm not an expert on writing them. I'm more of an expert on listening to them, though. I've been an audience. I've written my fair share, I suppose. If anything, I wouldn't say I'm an expert writing love songs. I'm an expert listening to them. But if I were to say what constitutes being able to write one, it's disappointment, longing, being hurt, being crushed, destroyed. It's all the negative parts of it that makes you want to write a love song. Not that many people write love songs about feeling good, and if they do, it's a blag. They're just trying to get over their feelings. Like Some Guys Have All the Luck. It sounds like an fun song. The song, Some Guys Have All, that song. When you hear the chorus, you think, it's a sing-along, good-feeling karaoke number. But when you listen to the lyrics, it's about a guy who's sitting on a bus looking at other couples, and he's sitting there alone, and he's not a very happy person. That's the point of view that most love songs are probably written from. You were always on my mind, but I never told you.
When it comes to songwriting, when writing a certain type of song, for example, is it a type of therapy for you?
I don't know. I've never been in therapy. So yes, it is. It's a kind of therapy, but you're also trying to lift your spirit and say something. That's the difference, I suppose, between writing songs for other people to sing and writing songs that you're singing yourself. I differentiate. I've never written songs thinking I'm going to send them off to someone else to sing. I've only written songs, even my collaborations, songs that I think I'm going to sing. So I'm expressing my own feelings. It's very common now for people to sit and knock out songs and farm them out to other artists. And that doesn't in any way mean that they're not as great songs. That's how all those guys in the Brill Building did it. And, many great songs have come out of that. Hal David and Burt Bacharach, they tried to sing them themselves, but, it wasn't very successful.
I have to mention, though, when it comes to your personal life, you're very private.
Yeah, well, I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about my private details, because that, in fact, I'm not a very proud person, and I'm not proud of much in my life, but one thing I'm proud of is that people don't have to know too much about me, and that makes me feel good, because the artists that I've loved in my lifetime, like let's say authors, Graham Greene, a great novelist. I read 10 of his novels and I never had any idea what he looked like or anything about him. I knew he was English just because of his name. But that's how I like it. I think art, you're offering whatever it is that you're offering. If it's a record, if it's a book. These days you have to give your whole, even if you have a book, you go on a book tour, you have to expose yourself. And then people are judging if they want to buy your book by your personality. And it really has gone way far in the wrong direction from my personal taste. I mean, most people like that. I don't like it. And I don't want to because I don't want to live in a high security prison. I don't want to have to stop being able to hang out and do what I do and get on a bus. I mean, who wants to live that way?
Being so private, I would assume that you're really not that interested in social media.
Well, I'm not that involved in it. I send a blog. I have a Facebook page. I've never gone on it myself, and I've never gone on anyone's Facebook page. I've been told not to by people that I know who say, don't even start doing that. And I've seen the faces of other people that are on it, and I don't like the looks on their faces. I'm just not interested, to be honest. I'm just not interested. And I hear so many negative things from people who have complaints about it, being in touch with people they don't want to be in touch with. And I think what I've been told is there's a kind of false sense of how people present themselves. They present themselves in the light that they want to be seen in. And someone said something to me once that I thought was true, and that was that you never really know what you look like when you look in the mirror. And I think that's true. You don't know how other people see you, because you look in the mirror at yourself with however you look at yourself, but that's not how other people see you. And I think that's probably what this social networking, you present the face that you want to see in the mirror, but you're not really seeing you're not presenting yourself as you would at a bus stop with a stranger, because you sort of doctor it and, make sure that you look the way you want to look. So anyway, I mean, I just don't have enough time for it. I'm not even judging it.
You got to tell us, how was your experience touring with Debbie Harry?
I really enjoyed doing those shows with her, and I was always so thrilled if she would come out and we'd walk around the shops together and stuff. And she was cooler than I was. Like, I'd be just about to buy something and she'd say, why don't you just think about it for a while? And I'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. And I'd put it back on the rack and we'd walk out, and in 10 minutes I didn't want it anymore. And she's smarter than me.
On another note, how long have you been a vegetarian?
Since the age of 17, I've been vegetarian, and I reckon that without a doubt, that got me through all the rest of the bullshit I was doing.
It must be difficult being a vegetarian with all the traveling that you do.
You really just don't need very much. That's the truth. People are obsessed. I mean, if I hear one more person that say to me, oh, do you just eat, you're only eating carbs? And in fact, every time I sit down for a meal in a restaurant, which is often, that's the first question. So, they want to talk about what I eat. And I'm like, God, can we just shut up? Can we just eat? I always have to qualify everything because I'm the only vegetarian or the only vegan. So, and I get all this stuff about carbs and do you do this and do you do that? You know what? Fuck it. I just do what I want to do. Just leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone, and I'll leave the animals alone, and you can do what you want to do with them. But if you do it in front of me, you're going to have to go through me.
Chrissie, I got to ask you a question before we go. You moved to London in the early 70s. What was it like being a part of that music scene that was happening over there?
Oh, I was more than fascinated. It was my whole life. That was everything to me. And then by the time I got to London and moved around and really started thinking I'd like to get in a band, and I spent a few years trying to do that, from London to Paris to Cleveland, back to Paris, and then back here, and then the punk thing was happening, and then I could see, up until then, although I would have liked to have been in a band and play guitar, I felt like being a girl was kind of like not the thing. I was too shy to get in a band with guys. In that punk scene, the deal was that first of all, nobody could play. So that was no longer a problem. And being a woman, or the whole thing was about non-discrimination. So whatever you did, you could do it and no one was going to make a comment.
Chrissie, thank you very, very much for coming on the show.
You too. Nice talking to you.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you again for listening to Popstar Conversations. Be sure to click the subscribe button below and hit the red bell so that you'll be notified of our next exclusive interview. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you for listening to Popstar Conversations. Please join us again for another conversation with your favorite musical artist.